Okay, so we are finally to the point where we're going to paint the fox, and so I just want to go over a couple of things before I start. We're going to do it similar to this, so you can see that you really are going to be working with light and shadow, and the light is kind of through the middle here. He's got some shadow under his chin to kind of pull that forward. Shadow in his ears and around here as well. So the colors that I'm going to be using are Quinacridone Sienna by Daniel Smith, and I've also got Burnt Sienna. This is Winsor Newton. If you don't have Quinacridone Sienna, you can just use Burnt Sienna. You can try to add, if you have gold, you could add a little gold to it. If not, if you just use the burnt sienna and then use a burnt umber to kind of darken the color up when we do some of the shadow work. And then other than that, the areas where, like his nose and around his eyes, I am just going to use what I have out already, and that is Moon Glow. So anything you have that's a dark, I mean, you can use black, just a dark color that you can use for the nose and just the tiny bit around his eyes. For the shadow part on the white, so in this painting I used colors that I had been using throughout, this blue, maybe some of this purple here, but since I used this turquoise and this mauve color, that's probably what I'm going to be using to shade his white parts. So it's best to kind of use what colors you've already used within your painting. So let's get started painting. I'm going to do his body first. So starting kind of simple. And for this, ooh, I have blue on my paintbrush. Rinse that out a little better and make sure that you change your water as well, because we just used all that blue and purple and now we're switching to red tones. So for this, I add a bit of water into the biggest part of the body. I'm not necessarily worried about getting close to the lines. I just need an area where that paint can kind of seep into the water. And then I'm going to start with a light wash of my Quinacridone Sienna, or whichever sienna you're using. And you want to make sure your paint is wet, and when I start into the painting, I'll start on a dry area and let that fade into that watery area. So I'm kind of starting in this small shape right here, being careful with my lines. And the reason that I put water down is so that I don't have, it allows me time so I don't get any hard edges. If you paint where the surface is dry, you'll start to get these kind of hard edges within your wash. So that's why I lay down just an area for my paint to kind of flow into, and it gives me a little extra time to work on these areas that are tight spaces within my drawing. And this is just our first wash. So you can see I'm not going too dark, but I do want my box to be vibrant. And I've just painted up to this leg, so I'm going to do this all in sections. So each little section of the foxes will paint one at a time. So once I get that first layer down, now I'm going to come into my burnt sienna, which is a little darker. So if you were using burnt sienna for this, this is when you would switch to the burnt umber. So I'm going to grab a little of that and I'm going to put it right back here to indicate that this area is a little darker, a little more in shadow. And you need to do that because this area of the tail is going to be pretty much the same color as the body, so you need to have a little darker area here to kind of differentiate those and really give some light and shadow and form to his shape. So I'm just plopping in wet paint right on top of my wet wash here. And I can do the same thing right up here where there might be a little shadow. So just a little, just to kind of give him some shape and form. So now I can go into this smaller area right in between his legs, and I don't really need to wet it first. It's such a small area and it's going to be pretty dark. This is going to be an area that's mostly in shadow, so I'm laying in a layer of the sienna. I'll come back with the darker sienna and put that right on top over the whole area. This area I may darken it up even more at some point, but for now I'm just going to do these two colors. Okay, so now we're going to work on his face.